The following program is paid for by the concerned clergy. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Urban One Incorporated, Radio One, or any of its subsidiary companies. The concerned clergy invites you to their weekly town hall meeting on Praise, AM 1310, 95.1 FM.
Well, we invite you to catch the replay. And that replay, that's our Substack, and that will replay on tomorrow. You can catch that on the Progressive Indiana Network. I want to also let everyone know that you can call into the radio station on tonight. That phone number is 317-480-1310. Once again, 317-480-1310. I'm Reverend Tony Alexander. I'm glad to be joined by Pastor David W. Greene Sr., who's also the president of the Concerned Clergy. I want to say welcome to all of you on this excellent Wednesday evening. Good evening, Mr. President. How are you?
Good evening, Reverend Alexander. It's good to be with you. Good to be back with our audience as well. Weren't able to make it last week, but I'm glad to be back with us.
Yeah. We're not able to make it last week, but we're glad we're able to be here this week, and all is well. Mr. President, can you go ahead and open us up in prayer, please?
Eternal God, our Father, we come before you once again as humble as we know how. Lord, we pray your blessings upon all of our listeners and participants on tonight. Lord, we continue to pray for our national leaders, our world leaders, our state leaders, and our local leaders. Lord God, bless our conversation on tonight and bring more glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, we invite you to be part of our conversation on tonight. You can comment on Facebook page of the Concerned Clergy of Indianapolis. You can also call into the radio station that is Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM. Indianapolis's inspirational station. That number is 317-480-1310. But more tonight, we got a couple things that we're going to lay out. We're going to at least begin our conversations with, but we invite you, if you have something else you want to talk about, feel free to call in or comment on our Facebook page as well. Once again, the Concerned Clergy of Indianapolis. Mr. President, I will start with last week, I think it was actually on Wednesday, may have been Tuesday, is when Governor Braun announced that he was putting an end to DEI here in Indiana, or more specifically, the DBE program, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, in the state of Indiana, which meant that there would be no goals, which the goals were not already being met. Also, that there will be no tracking because we did not get a disparity study to even help us monitor or determine where we need to be. And there's not going to be any effort. And what we've heard for years, Mr. President, is good faith effort. They're not going to have good effort. They ain't going to have faith effort. They ain't going to have no effort. Excuse me, English teachers.
You're correct, Reverend Alexander. Given that they were already doing disparity studies and were woefully behind, and were content to be woefully behind, this was certainly an egregious act. The Baptist Minister Alliance, along with the Concerned Clergy, did issue a public statement, calling this action out because we felt like that it was such an overreach and so egregious that it merited a response. I'm a firm believer that equal opportunity is not discrimination. Opening doors for qualified people who historically found those doors closed is not favoritism. It's what we call fairness. And we're not going to be a better state by limiting opportunities. I'm afraid a lot of younger people will pursue other options and leave our state. And I'm talking about talented people. And we have to keep in mind that it wasn't that long ago with George Floyd that everybody was saying, hey, we need to do these things and put people in place. And they acknowledged that discrimination had gone on, that there was disparity issues. And so there was a huge focus on it. To wake up now and decide, well, wait a minute, this is illegal. What are you talking about? we went through this, the whole civil rights movement, the establishing of all these things. The laws were all looked at in many organizations and missions, government and non-government. When the George Floyd thing took place, people owned that. Now we wake up and we want to say, let's undo all of that, turn it upside down. And it really goes back to the president because he's that way. We're just going to flip the whole thing and make it like it was wrong, it was illegal, and then try to lead people to believe that they have a more fair process. When, as you stated, wait a minute, we weren't even operating fairly with what we had before. We're certainly not going to be operating fairly in this boat. I mean, it just allows the big companies that will be greedy to say, I want it all. There's no reason for them to talk to a woman owned company, a black owned company, a Latino owned company. They'll say, I want the whole pie. You know, greed will prevail. And that greed will say there's fewer opportunities um, for black and women owned companies.
And let's really be clear when we, talk about what opportunities were actually out there and what opportunities that are, small businesses really had. In a lot of cases, they were crumbs. In a lot of cases, they were asked to do work for less than even the dollar amount that some of their Caucasian counterparts were. And they were accepting a lot of work only just to get in the door, thinking if I get in and if I perform, then I'll get an opportunity. And in a lot of cases, you didn't see that really happening when it came to any of our, minority contractors. They would get used. And our truckers would tell you a lot of times, once they got to a certain dollar amount, then they didn't get any more business. It was all about meeting, quote unquote, either a goal or a quota. Then after that, we were not going to allow you on our sites. So we know there's no fairness. And what you talked about, what we've gone on, what we've seen historically, what we've gone through historically, let's remember. We've had these studies every 5 years from various entities, whether it be the state of Indiana, whether it be the city of Indianapolis, whether it be one of these minority groups. Every single study has said that there was some disadvantage when it came to minorities and them getting business and contracts, etc. All it takes is for President Trump to say, hey, it's not fair. And then everybody says we're going to scrap the system. No data. We're not even going to do a disparity study even more to check out the data. We're going to say, because here I am, I declare that it's unfair. Everyone else has to say it's unfair too, and disregard all the data that we've had for many of years.
Exactly. But it speaks to who the governor is. I mean, when he came in office, the things he's done towards any predominantly black institution, whether it's Smart University, Black Expo, renaming the the it's not the Black Health Fair anymore. There's so many things that have gone on that it is clear from his action that he has no respect or regard for minorities. That's just blatant. I mean, um, he has numerous acts of racism that he continues to display. And the sad part of this, so one day he's receiving an award from Black Expo, the next day he's signaling to his base, here's what I think of that. Here's what I'm going to do. And we as people must wake up and say that it can't be more blatant and obvious than what it is, what he's doing, and how he feels. There's no way this is going to bring about more business opportunities for black-owned businesses or women-based businesses. If somebody, when they're trying to sell that, that's ridiculous. Because why, if I'm a white male and I have a large company, now I don't have to talk to you and deal with you. Why would I? My profit margin says there's no reason for me to do that. I'm not going to do that. That's the reason, the thing you just talked about. when we did have to talk to these other companies, we only used them for whatever the contract required. There was no working on having a relationship, expanding that work with these minority companies. It was like, if I need to do X amount of dollars with them so I can get the business, that's all I'm doing, then I'm going somewhere else. And so, and I agree with Amin, it is blatant, it is obvious, and we need to call it what it is, not run from it, and say, okay, this is where the governor is. If it walk like a duck and quack like a duck, it is a duck. Don't try to make it something else. We should not be running around, and a few, minorities will try to do this to act like, well, it ain't that bad. It is that bad. It's egregious. It's offensive. It's degrading, and we shouldn't be trying to mask that by trying to promote it like, okay, something great and good is going to come out of it. Not for Black and brown businesses, not for even women-owned businesses. There might be a couple of exceptions for a little while. They won't last long before somebody takes them over. When somebody white decides they want that business, they want all of it, they'll be able to get it.
Well, Mr. President, what I believe is, and if you'd like to be part of the conversation, feel free to call in 317-480-1310. One thing that you mentioned, IBE, for instance, Indiana Black Expo, understanding what this governor has already done since he's been in office from day one. The governor's reception, quote unquote, yeah, we can receive you, Mr. Governor. However, you're going to have to listen to what we have to say. We've seen what you did from day one in getting rid of DEI. We've seen what you're doing to our universities. We've seen what you're doing as far as, some of the food programs, taking things out of our children. Instead of just giving somebody, okay, quote unquote, a warm reception, this could have been an opportunity to lay out, okay, here are some things we want to see from you. Now, understanding that wouldn't have changed what he did, when he did it, but at least you're coming and showing that we're not just going to pretend that we don't see what you're doing. Not only are we going to take this opportunity to welcome you to Black Expo, but we're also going to ask you to take this opportunity to hear from the constituents that are the ones that support Black Expo as well.
Alexander, your suggestion is a lot better than what we received. I mean, to talk about they're going to monitor this, there's no way they can monitor it. The data is not one. They don't have money to do disparity studies because that's thousands of dollars. Two, the state's not going to be collecting the data because they don't want to share the data because they don't want to get busted for this stuff. You have to go on what we already have. And what we already have is data that points out that Black businesses, women-owned businesses, Black businesses are worse, we're not getting their fair share of opportunities in the state of Indiana. That while we make up a good percentage of people in Indiana, we weren't getting any of that business. I mean, we literally know from the work that we've done through the concerned clergy that you led through the economic community. I mean, IU built buildings and did stuff with less than 3% minority participation. Mm-hmm. Purdue did stuff. I mean, our schools, IUPUI, were doing major projects, and we were, in single digits, and in the single digits, less than 5. Wait a minute. In our own backyards, this was going on, and so, and this has been going on for years. We're not talking about a one-off situation. We're talking about things that we can say, well, this happened this year. Ball State did this year, and the data's there, and which they would admit back then. Yeah, we need to do better. And the solution to doing better is we're going to cut the whole thing out. How's that going to end up with better? That's not going to end up with better. And, people can have different opinions for the Republicans that are listening right now, but you can have different facts. You're asking people to believe a charade when you say, okay, yeah, this is going to be better, this MEI thing. No, it's not. And at the heart, they know it's not.
Well, Mr. President, at least with DEI, you could have some goals and some percentages for what that meant. You know, whether it's what was 15, 8, 3, and 1. Okay, well, we have some metrics there. With MEI, we have nothing whatsoever. But we have a whole lot of you folks saying, oh, yeah, that makes sense, when it makes absolutely no sense. And Amin, you're right. It's very scandalous. If you want to be part of the conversation, call in 317-480-1310. Let's go ahead and bring in Imhotep.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Two of my most ardent gentlemen in the city. Thank you for taking my call.
Praise the Lord.
It's a somber last couple of weeks with that announcement, and let's not forget Rokita is actually Attorney General Todd Rokita is actually he is actually probably the catalyst behind the scenes in the governor's back, because he's the one that came out with the statement that said he used legalese. It's unconstitutional. So that goes back to the Supreme Court, goes back to the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, who highlights hundreds of precedents that the Supreme Court did to allow the police to do what they do, to allow crack versus cocaine differential back when they did. Supreme Court overturned affirmative action. Supreme Court allowed Trump and ICE to be able to target people because of their race. You can't do it on this end for hiring, but you can do it for stopping people. They're having a rally in Fishers. I read all those articles today. Oh my goodness, up there in Fishers, you folks up there in Fishers, you got counter protests going on. You better counter protest against what's going on, because you do have a lot of immigrants in the Fishers community. And Greg Bovino, a person who was fired, by the way, is being paid by people to come up there and stir up trouble about moving immigrants out of Fishers. It's just crazy. I've been sitting up here coming past Riverside for the last couple of weeks where they were paving 30th and 29th Street. And so I walked this path since they built it. And I walked it a couple of days last week. And I just paid even more deep attention to the contractor who would Meade, M-A-D-E. You're probably familiar with Meade. Contractor does a lot of road work along with Reach Riley and others. And then I looked at all the workers, you know, and okay, take away the machines, because you got to have a journeyman's car for a machine. And we know how they treat us when it comes to getting skilled trades and getting journeyman's cars to work these machines. But let's just take the laborers. The guy slinging the tar on the asphalt before the presser comes and lays the road, all white. I thought, you know, maybe it's changed, but I thought if you were doing work in a particular neighborhood, that a certain percentage of the employees needs to be from that neighborhood, it needs to be minority, something like that. Maybe you guys can clarify that. But not even one laborer, not even one guy slinging a rubber squeegee, slinging the tar was black. Not one person. And they've done 30th. They've done it from the bridge, 29th, all the way down to the highway, and subsequently coming back on 30th Street all the way back this way, and I haven't seen one black employee. That is very disturbing. I think, Bob, I think this is your district, Bob. So maybe, like you just talked about disparaging impact and Expo talking about we monitor. You can't monitor.
Exactly.
Need to be called to the carpet. Hey, we want to see who in this neighborhood you've hired. Okay, well, they don't have a journeyman's car. Fine, we're not talking about for a skill position. We're talking about for your laborers. They can't sling a squeegee and sling tar at $21 an hour? Come on now. It's really pathetic. And how can the majority how can white males, or white people, period, since they're the majority, but white males, I think, are only, 23% of America? So, but we'll say white people, period, since they're the majority. How can the majority claim to be discriminated by the minority? That's the craziest thing you ever want to hear, pastors. I'll leave you with this. Ben Franklin started the city of Philadelphia, people. If you don't know Ben Franklin, history of Philadelphia, go look it up. Okay. Ben Franklin said that the rights of the minorities, he said it's the majority that should ensure that the rights of the minorities are upheld at all costs. Because remember how we was treated when we were the minorities, when we left England and came over here leading King King of George and stuff like that.
Okay.
They have forgotten all of that. They've forgotten any of that. We had a little period of time.
Well, they're getting rid of it.
Reconstruction is mainly us.
Let's be honest.
In the 60s, when a few jumped on. But other than that, that's about it. It's really sad.
All right. Well, thanks, Imhotep. Appreciate you.
Boycotts will work. I keep boycotting.
Well, I think we're beyond that, but thanks, Imhotep. There's a couple things there. And I'll start with, Imhotep asked about, where, if you're in a certain neighborhood, should there be certain minorities in there? It really gets a little bit more. If you get into the weeds, it depends on if it's a state contract, if there's any federal dollars, if it's a city contract. If you used to be anyway, if it's city, then you've got your XBE where you have the 15, 8, 3, and 1 percentages. If you're state, then you have DBE. If you have federal dollars, then the rules kind of go out the window. So there's so much there, Imhotep, that you have to break down and understand when it just comes to the basic contract. What kind of contract is this? Who's going to do it? And then when you're looking at Meade, Meade isn't really even an Indianapolis contractor. I mean, they may have an Indianapolis office, but they're really from Chicago. They're doing a lot of work here now. And what you see is absolutely true, because you're not seeing a lot of local folks. You're seeing a lot of folks that are coming from other areas. And you're seeing that not just on your highway jobs, but pretty much in all of your major projects that are out there. And then the last thing I'm going to say here before we go to break is right now, we're beyond monitoring. There's nothing to monitor right now. What we've got to do is we got to galvanize. We got to come with a strategy. We got, all these different groups or silos that our president talks about, Pastor Greene, all these different silos. We got to say there's no need for a silo anymore. We got to come together. All these different presidents of organizations, some of the folks that are holding up their arms need to come together and say, here's the strategy we need to come up with. That's going to help us all. We got to go to break. If you want to be part of the conversation, you can call in 317-480-1310. When we come back from our break, we got Amin. We'll bring him on. But once again, 317-480-1310. You're listening to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show on Praise, AM 1310, 95.1 FM, Indy's Inspiration Station. Welcome back to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show. I'm Reverend Tony Alexander, and we have our president, Pastor David W. Greene Sr., joined us as well. And we have you. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, you can call in to the radio station. The number is 317-480-1310. And yes, you can also comment on our Facebook page in that order, Mr. Jarrellian Ragan. Feel free to do that as well. And once again, we invite you to either comment there or once again, feel free to call in. We also have a comment there from Ryan in regards to how charter schools are taking over Indy. And Ryan, you just hold on a little bit. We're going to try to discuss that a little bit as well on this evening. But once again, feel free to call in 317-480-1310. We have Amin, who's on the line with us. Good evening.
Good evening, brother.
Good to hear from you.
Same here. Hey, yeah, I just have I'm kind of, I don't know who has the answer. Seems to me there's always two schools of thought. One was Farrakhan way, I guess, if you will. Another is Martin Luther King way. And I mean, when it comes to education now, employment, I don't have an answer. I just know one thing my grandfather always said in the pulpit, rest his soul. He used to always say black folks would still be slaves if it wasn't for some good white folk. I just wonder where they at. I'll take my answer offline. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for listening in for your phone call. Mr. President, you want to kind of address that?
I really don't have a good solution for it. I do believe this. I believe that we have been too complacent as a people here in Indiana. I think that we are going to have to figure out, are we going to allow these subtle messages and no action to be the solution to what's happening? How much more can we continue to take? I mean, if we, quote unquote, if we were to monitor, to continue to advocate monitor, well, what you waiting on? And when would it start and what would it look like? Because I believe there are things that needs to be happening right now. We have to be able to say, we're going to address this because it's an egregious act by leadership. This is, and we have to call it out for what it is. And we got to call out the people who are going to cover it up, that are going to be like, oh, let's try to mask this. And because they're not doing it without some people who should be saying, who should be offended, saying it's okay. And we should all be saying, this is egregious. We're offended. This can't continue that way. So, I mean, should women-owned companies should be joining with Black-owned companies and Latino-owned companies saying, hey, well, no, we're together on this. We can't continue to see, this is not going to make for a better Indiana. I just don't see young entrepreneurs saying, let me stay in Indiana, I might have a chance. If I'm a woman, if I'm a Black, I mean, like, why would you do that? Because there's a market here, even though we're paying taxes, that you can't participate in. These business deals are being made without you. You won't even know about it until you see them going on. I mean, you're not going to be at the table. There's no reason for you to be at the table.
And that's a key point that we really miss is, okay, our tax dollars are going to a lot of these projects, but yet you're saying that we can't participate in being able to benefit, as well from our entrepreneurship, in addition to that. But it even goes beyond just a quote unquote minority company, woman owned company or anything else. In traditionally, and I know this from experience, the smaller companies are dealing with other smaller companies. And you could ask anybody from a large scale, they'll tell you that America really is run by small businesses. While we might have the Microsofts and you might have all the big AIs, Googles and Amazon and all these folks that are now, doing a lot of great work, the backbone of this country really comes down to the 1 and 2, 5, pop shops and all that kind of stuff, mom and pop shops, and their network. They're dealing with people in our rural areas. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 folks. They're dealing with other folks in their rural area. Well, now what you're pretty much saying is we're going to get rid of all of that. We're going to let that, pretty much dry up. And then we're going to force you, having to do something else. And we're going to take away all those opportunities, and it's going to affect not just the one business entrepreneur, but then all the ones they spend money with in their communities, how they're giving jobs to their family members. You see, Donald Trump says it's okay for him to give jobs to his family members, but he don't want you to start your business and be able to give jobs to your family members. That's a big difference, and we need to recognize that as well.
And the sad part of it is Governor Braun ran as a small business guy. He's going to elevate, promote small businesses. He didn't say, well, it's only certain small businesses. He didn't say you had to be white owned. He didn't run on that platform. He didn't say that. But his actions have now said, oh, yeah, if you've got to be a white owned business, that's who I'm for. I'm not for Black owned businesses, women owned businesses. I'm not for minority owned businesses. He didn't say that. And we're a big part of, quote unquote, small businesses. And how do you get big if you never even get the first contract? And so he's limiting, well, you ain't even going to become big. So we're going to make it hard for you to become a big company. And so, and that stuff has to be called out in this day and age. So I think I would say to Amin, I think the season is shifting. I know I've reached out to the Indy Chamber to say, okay, Indy Chamber, where are you at? Because they should, a number of their businesses are small businesses, and they need to be on record on where they are regarding this. If you're the indie business chamber and you're supposed to be representing businesses, you can't just represent just the large businesses. If you are, say that, then all the small businesses can get out.
Well, he's got an interesting comment there. Ella means went from the phone to the chat. Taking the penny out of circulation might be a sign to move us out of circulation.
Oh, it could be. Exactly. The voting is to make it more difficult to be pretty much more in the prison system, et cetera. And I mean, this ties into education. All this goes together. Like, where are you going to end up at?
But I do want to say this because he also, brought up a point, Mr. President, and I want to lift up the point because he mentioned something his grandfather said that a lot of our struggle, if you will, if I can kind of paraphrase, you had some Caucasians there that were there I'm gonna use the term assist, that were there to help the cause. Um, and I think we still have some of those folks. When you look at, like the No Kings rallies, I think you saw a lot of folks that could come together for a common cause and say, you know what, we're going to stand together for this cause. And I think even when we're talking about minority business enterprise, that's another cause we can all stand together with. And just another reason why we should, because let's be real, and all this DEI stuff going away, it's going to affect women as well. All the voting rights that are being attacked is going to affect women as well. And you need to understand that if your if your husband's going to be able to vote at the same time he's voting that you won't be able to vote, you should revisit, okay, wait a minute, which side am I going to support? I ain't saying leave your husband, but what I am saying is vote for somebody else. You really need to consider that. So let's go ahead. We'll go to our other break for the hour. When we come back, we do want to talk about IPS. They're now under a different governance structure, and they're looking for a director to lead that structure. And we got some candidates. We're going to kind of talk about them. And we also had a comment earlier in regards to what's happening in Indianapolis in regards to charter schools and really the structure of Indianapolis. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, you can call in that phone number, 317-480-1310, 317-480-1310. You're listening to the Concerned Clergy radio show on Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM, Indy's Inspiration Station. Welcome back to the Concerned Clergy radio show. I'm Reverend Tony Alexander, and I'm joined by President Pastor David W. Greene Sr. We invite you to be part of the conversation. Feel free to call into the studio, 317-480-1310. And you can also comment on the Facebook page, The Concerned Clergy of Indianapolis. Early on, we had a comment on our Facebook feed there from Ryan. And Ryan said that the charter schools are taking over Indy in a bad way, and people don't understand how terrible they really are. And he went on to share about how it's terrible how there's corruption and how Indiana schools are treated. And just before our break, literally right before our break, we talked about that when we came back, we would be speaking right on the search for the new executive director for the new entity that's been put in place to lead IPS and charter schools. And Mr. President, we have breaking news that there's been an announcement over our commercial break. You want to go ahead and share that?
Yeah, IPS has actually hired, I think it's Karega Rausch. He's a charter school leader to be in charge of, be the IPEC director. So we have somebody, they are charter school background, which was to be expected by most of us who have been following this, that was the plan. Mind Trust actually announced it before the mayor announced it. So that's what we're going to have. Or the city of Indianapolis announced it, Mind Trust announced. So that's an indication of where we're going, what's up. And so I have to agree that there's going to be a plethora of charter schools evolving. And IPS is at a critical place as they're looking to do a referendum in November. Does it pass? What happens? There's a lot of questions.
Here's what we'll find out, Mr. President. We'll just have to look at the actions, and I believe the name is Karega Rausch. We'll just have to look at the actions of Mr. Rausch. You can see how hard he fights for the referendum. They are supposedly looking for $95 million on this referendum. You'll know how hard that he's fighting for the referendum because whichever way it goes, the charters are going to get their money. That's for sure. But the question is, okay, how hard is he going to fight for the referendum? Because a hard fought fight means at least you're really trying to save IPS in part of the process. If you're really, kind of softballing it and, swinging at every wild pitch throughout this last, couple of months or whatever that we have left, then that shows you're not really serious about saving IPS and you're looking more at the dollars and how we can fund more charter schools. And in any effect, that really goes back to what Ryan says, that it's terrible how Indiana schools are being treated because our children are being tossed around. Every single time we get a new superintendent, every other couple of years, we get more, a new strategic plan. Our children are getting tossed and fro just like they're on the Titanic. And our education is really sinking right before our very eyes.
That's a great way of saying it because it really is going on. It's going to cause this whole process is detrimental to children. I mean, it. I mean, I think they're trying to accomplish multiple things. It's the destruction of the teachers union. When they get done with this, you won't have a teachers union, and the destruction of schools and ultimately communities, because all of that's going to get destroyed here. I mean, this is very well could end up being like a takeover of school. I mean, there's a lot of things out here, and you're right. Pay attention to how far. I mean, you better be selling this referendum yesterday. That's a lot of money to ask people to say invest in IPS when you got this quote unquote new board that's in control. People know that the elected board don't mean anything. It's up to these 7 people we have here now. Uh, and I don't know if they want to say I trust them 7 people with the money. There's a lot of issues in here. Are they gonna, get behind him and say, okay, yeah, I'm willing to give him $90 million and commit that? I don't know.
Well, it's pretty obvious that a lot of the decisions on what the goal is moving forward has already been made. But the question is, will that be communicated to the public in a way in which the public can really trust what's being communicated to the public? Let's go ahead and bring in our caller. We got Joyce is on the line. Joyce, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good evening.
So I went through IPS, and like I had family members that were principals and other things in IPS. But what I noticed was with Evan, it was some little mayor that was trying to break down the school system. The one governor that was too good to live in the governor's mansion. Yeah, the one that was vice president. That's when our school system, and then all of these other schools, they haven't lived up to their contract. So one would think we'd be living on the larger side of checking their credentials. Maybe you don't understand what I'm saying. They get a contract, they take the money, and then they fail to uphold their contract. What happens in that case? Because there have been many of them schools you mentioned outside of IPS. I'm all about IPS. Sorry for y'all.
No, we understand your point, Joyce.
They got Heron. They got so many good schools, magnet schools. Magnet schools are not the same as what they push it with these pop-up. Ain't even in the city. Don't know our situation, condition, community. Hey, that part all.
All right. Thank you so much for your phone call, Joyce. And Joyce,
you're welcome. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah.
Yeah. Joyce hit on, a lot of good points, really. And for a lot of folks that don't understand the charter system, Joyce really nailed a couple of them, as far as looking at the people, that are leading the schools, they're really not invested in the community. That's something we've talked about a whole, for a long time about, a lot of the board being led for folks that are out of state, don't even really come, here to Indiana. And then when you look at, okay, where is I think her other point, was that like where's some of the funding going, some of the money going. What we're seeing right now is that they're slowly taking money from IPS to feed charter schools. And she also mentioned a lot of these charter schools are failing. That was another excellent point. They're failing. You may hear a blurb about it, but you don't see the effect that it has on those students and the families when all of these charter schools are failing, like some of the restaurants and department stores that we see that are going away as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, she brought out some excellent points, and we've spent some time on our show and previous shows talking about the number of charter schools that don't make it is phenomenal. And what happened to those kids? We're just moving kids around, disrupting families, because somebody has a good idea. Not to say that every charter school is bad, because that's not a true statement. But if you're going to take public money, I think everybody should be held to the same standard. Everybody should be held to the same standard. You shouldn't just be able to, you get money, but you don't have to play by the same rules. I mean, a lot of these charter schools, they don't want special needs children, and special needs children end up in the public school because that costs more money, because it requires different staffing levels. You shouldn't be able to do that. If you're taking public money, then you're going to have to take your fair share, quote unquote, of special needs children. You shouldn't be like, okay, we're going to leave the children who need more resources in this system over here, even though we're going to take the money and we want the cream of the crop over here. And so we're going to look good, because we took the cream of the crop, but we left these other students over here depend on their own with fewer resources when they needed more resources. That's the kind of stuff that irks me, Rem Alexander. If you're going to, because charter school say, we're public school too, well, operate like a public school then.
Right.
Be consistent about that. Be willing to be held to the same standard. Matter of fact, you should go work just as hard to get a referendum. Not sit back, well, we're going to get the referendum regardless. We ain't got to do nothing. We just
And they're not supporting, they're not supporting it, as far as the fight. They're supporting the money, of course,
right.
but they're not out there lobbying for it.
And they should be in that. There should be something that brings everybody to the table, not just, okay, I can reap from the money and get in. Most of the time you're in a position to get other, money from my trust or their financial backers as well. You shouldn't be, okay, but the public school, they got to jump through all the hoops. They got to conduct all the meetings. They got to go out and interface to the community. I'm sitting over here as a charter school, just, y'all get this through, just cut me my check. Huh? How's that supposed to work, and how's that fair? If you're going to claim you're a public school, then let's be in it all the way. Let's have the same standard. Let's not be walking around, well, no, we want this student, but we don't want this student. They shouldn't be able to do that.
Well, there shouldn't be competition between schools, to be honest with you. I mean, there should not be competition between schools. All schools should be saying, hey, we want to share the load, for being able to educate all of the students, be able to have all of the same resources, equal resources. Because what also happens is if you got, quote unquote, the cream of the crop, or, have everybody's trying to get the best and the brightest. Well, everybody can't get the best and the brightest. But the ones that are, quote unquote, going to school that may rate or grade with the best of the brightest, you're going to see them getting, more resources, getting funded, extracurricular activities, other activities to support what they're doing, and taken away from, some other children that could certainly use some of those resources also.
That would make more sense than And it wouldn't be us versus them, right? Now we would be in it together saying, how do we help our children across the board? And we would share in that responsibility as opposed to, I still see this ending up in a very finger pointing thing. I still think it's going to lead to gentrification of neighborhoods. I still think that they've got schools, school sites that they've identified that will be closed because something else is going to end in here. This is a long range thing. It's set in motion, and I don't believe they have hired, quote unquote, a disruptor to the master plan. This person hired has to help execute the master plan, which will involve really the destruction of IPS. It will lead to gentrification of some neighborhoods. It will lead to a bunch of financial benefits for some while robbing and stealing from others. And then they don't want you to say that, when in reality, you're going to watch it, you're going to see it.
So it's just been announced that the IPEC board here in Marion County, Indianapolis, they've already decided who the first executive director. We had interim Michael Connor, but now we're going to have our first executive director. I think that's the title, Karega Rausch. What the bio is that we have shared says that Rausch was the education and charter schools director for former Indianapolis mayors Bart Peterson and Greg Ballard before being the director of the local affiliate of school reform organization Stand for Children. Stand for Children, most folks understand, is really a leader in the charter school network. It also says there that Rausch also chaired the Indiana Charter Schools Board. He joined the National Association of Charter School Authorizers in 2014 and has been president and CEO since 2020 of the National Association of Charter School Authorizers. So he's bleeding. His blood is in the charter system. So that'll give you, I would say, quite an indication of where he is probably looking to lead this organization. We got a caller on the line. Let's go ahead and bring in our caller. We got in Guy. How you doing, Guy?
Good evening, gentlemen. Couple of things. First thing, the talk about the set asides and this and that and DEI. It seems like although we've gotten the notoriety, so to speak, of those programs, the actual effect, the actual putting into place of people in those jobs seems to be lacking. It's interesting that Alexander Miles invented the elevator doors closing and opening, automatic doors opening and closing, which revolutionized the elevator, which is a part of so many buildings. And it's interesting that he made the invention, but some don't want to see the value of people of color on those kinds of jobs. The other thing I wanted to say was, in terms of the charters and public schools, to your knowledge, has there ever been actual data, facts, in terms of what the charter schools have put out in their product in terms of students and the performance, as opposed to those in public schools? To your knowledge, has there ever been data to that?
Well, certainly. I mean, the IDOE, Indiana Department of Education, they, annually would put out those statistics. Now, all of the charter schools didn't always have to report, but there is enough data that will support that charter schools are not performing any better than our public schools, and in many cases are performing worse.
Why don't we make that public?
It is public.
That most people understand that.
It is public. This
no, I mean on people's lips, like so many other things.
Well, it's who's controlling the narrative. Let's be real. I mean, everything that we're looking at now comes down to literally almost who's controlling the narrative and how that narrative gets put out. I mean, you see Republicans, and this is just my opinion. I'll let our president answer as well. It's like the Republicans are pretty much, they're always on one accord, one message, no matter what it is. They're always going to be on one accord and one message, good, bad, or indifferent. I'll say for the most part, we at least try to think based on whether what we know or what we think we know or what we heard or what we saw on some social media. Mr. President, you got any thoughts on that? And thanks, Guy, for calling. Take care.
Well, Guy brings up what the real challenge is. The real challenge is having the resources to get that message out. The people who are lying can usually have a lot of money. In this case, they have a lot of money. And so they only lift up the positive side to something, or they're one of the schools that are doing well. They're not going to talk about the schools that closed. They're not going to bring that up when there's a number of them that closed. That's documented, that's public, but very few are going to talk about it. Very few are media outlets are going to cover that. They're going to, the other side can pay to put out an article that's rosy and how great things are and how they're going to turn it around. They're not going to talk about that, even the mayor who has charter schools, right? He's never, that I've heard it when he gave the state of the city, talked about how great the education systems are and what his schools were doing. He never talks about that topic. That never comes up. Now, why is that? And if it was doing well, he's a mayor, he's a politician, he'd bring it up. But he never brings that up because he knows that what the real data is. So there's nothing there to talk about other than say, the last time he won that, hey, I'm going to focus on education.
Here's what we're going to do.
Exactly. But he did not speak to, in my term, for over 8 years, in my charter schools, they're performing at this level in math and this level in English, and they're doing this. He did not share any of that. Why? Because he has nothing there to say, to
and
speak
this
about.
Is how many has closed.
Exactly. He's not going to want to touch that. And so those things are out there. They are facts. Unfortunately, though, people are getting glossy stuff in the mail. We get ready to go back to school, right? So the charter school people, if you got My Trust money behind you, you're sending out mailings in the neighborhood with glossies and talking about how great your school is, etc. You're not telling anything about true performance of your school, where your school, challenges are. You ain't doing that. You're sending that parent a nice glossy, trying to get students into your school and make it sound good. You're going to lift up whatever you can lift up and word it however you need to word it. They may not lie, but they'll mislead you. And then there you go. That's the nature of marketing. You do that when you got money. Well, other schools, if you don't have the resources, you may have a great school, but you can't send your message out. You can't get your message out. And so, they're not going to let Rem Alexander and I on CNN right now to talk about this. Because even though we'll be telling the truth, they're going to be like, we ain't trying to have that. Now, the other side may pay to get somebody on the news and to spout things out because that will be a piece of it.
Well, listen to this, Mr. President. So 2 topics, we talked about on tonight. So for DEI, when it comes to Black businesses, you got to be established, have all these many years before we can trust you, or we can't, all this stuff. But it's the flip when it comes to education. No, we want you to come in and embrace this little charter school that just came in and gave us their quote unquote plan last year. We want you to trust them with your children's education.
On an idea.
That's where we're at right now. I know we got some callers on the line that couldn't make it tonight. So, hopefully we'll catch you next week. I see Reverend Phillips, you're one of them. I owe you a phone call, so I'll try to catch you maybe tomorrow. The rest of you, thanks for calling in. Thanks for listening. Mr. President, thank you. Good to have you back on tonight. Good to be back tonight. And everyone, keep praying, and we pray to be with you next week. Be blessed.
You've been listening to the weekly town hall meeting brought to you by the Concerned Clergy in cooperation with Praise AM 1310 95.1 FM. The views and opinions expressed on the town hall meeting are not necessarily the views of Praise AM 1310 95.1 FM, Radio 1, or its management.